Welcome to this episode of Now That's Good Chemistry, a podcast devoted to exploring chemicals in our lives. I'm your host, Susan Savage. We are broadcasting from our studio on the campus of Indian Hill High School, located in Cincinnati, Ohio. Joining me today are three students from Mr. Mark Atwood's Latin 3 class, Sophie Tinsdale, JC Chen, and Casey DeBlank. The students are here to share how chemistry connects to the success of Hannibal's military campaign in the Second Punic War. Before they share their understanding, however, a few questions for Mr. Atwood. What was the Second Punic War, and why is it significant to the Roman history?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, the Second Punic War is one of three wars in a very long struggle between the Romans and their neighbors, the Carthaginians, who inhabited a city, Carthage, in North Africa, not too far from Rome. And if we look back, right, through the lens of history, we realize that these struggles, all three of them together, were really existential in nature, meaning that one of these two major power brokers in the Mediterranean was going to come out in undisputed, sort of in control of the region, and the other was going to cease to exist, which eventually happened. Okay, the Carthaginians were totally wiped out by the Romans after the Third Punic War. We're going to focus on the Second Punic War, which is probably the most dangerous and significant for the Romans. The second reason it's important is because the Second Punic War is really wrapped up in the Romans' national character. The Romans don't have a nation state, so we can't say national character, but it forms a part of their real identity, kind of like World War II does for us today. There's all these movies and books about World War II. Same thing with the Romans. A lot of their literature and history in later years focuses on the Punic Wars. And those stories really make up the third reason why it's so important to me. There are just a ton of really good stories about that war, and some of them have to do with heroism, and some of them have to do with just pure ingenuity, which I think you're going to hear today from our students. So I'll turn it over to them, and as we say in Latin, let's go, or eamus.
Yeah, so our story, which is based on the historical account of ancient Roman historian Livy, starts during the Second Punic War around 219 BCE. The Punic Wars occurred during the 2nd and 3rd centuries BCE, and they were fought between the Roman Republic and the Empire of Carthage, which was located on the northern coast of Africa.
Hannibal, who was the Carthaginian general at the time, had a problem. Between Rome and Carthage, there were tall mountains called the Alps, which he had to go over if he wanted to attack Rome.
Wait, Casey, I thought that the Mediterranean Sea was between Carthage and Rome, not the Alps.
Well, actually, Hannibal and his army went up through the Spanish peninsula and around the European coast that way.
Okay.
However, when he went to cross the mountains, large rocks were blocking his path, and since he could not wait any longer to invade Rome, he needed to find a solution.
But he couldn't just turn around and go back, because that would mean he failed. But he also couldn't go around in the deep snow, because it would have been hard on his army and his animals, which included hundreds of war elephants. He was stuck, his supplies were running out, and his army was in danger of starvation before they even reached Rome.
So how did he get out of this mess? Well, two authors, Livy and Polybius, have accounts of what happened. Now, Polybius didn't mention this, but Livy wrote that Hannibal had cooked up an ingenious situation involving chemistry and a common drink in army rations, wine.
In Livy's account of the tale, Hannibal's engineers lit a flame under the large rocks blocking their path. Then they poured vinegar on the heated rocks, causing a reaction that broke the rocks into much smaller pieces. That way, he could easily move the rocks out of the way, and his army could continue to march on Rome.
The fact that this story exists indicates that some people did believe that this event happened. So it raises the question of whether or not pouring vinegar on heated rocks would make them split, and what would happen within the rocks to cause it to split. Is it all rocks or a specific type of rocks only in the Alps? Would the fact that it was winter have any relation to the rock splitting?
So how did Hannibal's engineer actually break the rocks with just heated vinegar? Let's take a look at the actual chemistry. First, what is vinegar? To us, it may seem like an everyday cooking ingredient, but to Hannibal's army freezing in the snow, they saw it as his chemical identity and acid. Specifically, acetic acid, whose chemical formula is CH3COOH.
But does acid melt all rocks like how Livy's story tells us? Obviously not. So there had to be a specific type of rock in the Italian Alps that could be broken down with acetic acid. A rock that is very common in the Alps is limestone.
But if acetic acid can't break down every type of rock, what makes limestone so special? Well, limestone is mainly composed of calcium carbonate, whose chemical formula is CaCO3. When acetic acid, the vinegar, mixes with the calcium carbonate, a chemical reaction occurs, and the chemical structure of the rocks is rearranged. This reaction produces calcium acetate, carbon dioxide, and water. The solid product of this process, calcium acetate, is very weak and can be broken down easily. Also, when you heat an acid, you're actually adding kinetic energy, which speeds up the process of breaking down the limestone more quickly in Hannibal's favor. So there's the truth behind Livy's version of the story.
To recap, Hannibal's invasion of Rome in the Second Punic War remains one of the most incredible military feats in history. He led his massive army, which included hundreds of military elephants, through the Alps during the winter to get to Rome. Two differing accounts of this campaign have survived, one from Livy and one from Polybius. By applying heat in the form of fire to the acetic acid and vinegar, Hannibal's army caused a chemical reaction that changed calcium carbonate of the limestone rock to carbon dioxide, water, and calcium acetate, which is weak and easy to break down with force. In this way, Hannibal's army was able to clear the path to Rome. Had it not been for the specific chemical makeup of limestone, Hannibal may not have been successful. It was the combination of limestone, vinegar, and heat that allowed for Hannibal's success. Thanks to our guest, Indian Hill Latin teacher Mark Atwood, Latin students Sophie Tinsdale, JC Chen, and Casey DeBlank. Now, That's Good Chemistry is a collaboration between the students and faculty at Indian Hill High School in partnership with TARA, Toxicology Excellent for Risk Assessment. Our technical supervisor and Indian Hill Television Network executive producer and technology teacher is Denny Dubs. Our script supervisor and editor is English teacher Tom Millard. Our graphic designers are students Liz George and Ryan Kennebeck. Our theme music was composed by former student Preston Marks. Thanks to the faculty, staff, and administration at Indian Hill for their behind-the-scenes efforts and support. Until next time, I'm your host, Susan Savage.